Mia Courtney. I am a homeschooling mom and business owner at As We Walk Along the Road. And this video is one in my series all about literature-based learning. So today I want to talk about some whole family benefits of reading aloud. I often hear moms talking about reading aloud to their younger kids. And I think that's something that most of us just sort of do out of a habit. We read to our kids. I read to my kids from the time I found out I was pregnant. I was one of those moms who would read to my stomach and hope that that growing baby could hear my voice, even if they didn't really understand what I was reading. And then I read to them from the time they were born, when they were little and sitting in bouncy seats. I read books. And I know lots of moms that do this. But as our kids get older, and especially as they move into reading independently, I think many people don't see the need to continue to read aloud. And so that's what I want to talk about today. I want to share some benefits of reading aloud for the whole family, not just for your littles that can't read on their own, but for everybody in the family, including you. And I'll start with a story of my own family. I read aloud to my kids all the way through their high school years, through most of their high school years. They are now ranging in age from 15 to 22 at the time of this video. And I read aloud until my two oldest weren't around at lunchtime, because lunchtime was our read aloud time. And I would read while they ate lunch, and then I would eat lunch afterwards. They were sort of a captive audience. But I can remember specifically a book that we were reading. It was an allegorical book about your spiritual walk. And it was a story of a boy and the city that he lived in. And it was sort of representative of a new Christian, kind of just starting off in the Christian walk and things that could happen along the way. And so I had just read a chapter of this book to my kids. It was lunchtime, and my kids at the time were upper elementary aged and high school aged. And so I finished the chapter, and we launched off into a great discussion about the spiritual walk. And it wasn't something that I had even really planned. It was a conversation that came up because one of the kids asked a question or made a comment about what had just happened in the story I read. And so we launched off onto this really great discussion. And reading aloud really had lots of benefits, even though my kids were older, and it benefited me to have that discussion. So I want to share with you just a few of the benefits that you can find when you read aloud to your whole family. One benefit is that you can expose your kids to good books. I'll be honest, not all of my kids have been avid readers. I have some who have been, but I have others who just don't really take the time to read unless they find a great book that really interests them. And there are books that they would pass over on our shelves because they wouldn't find the title interesting, or they wouldn't think that they would like the subject in the book. So reading aloud allowed me to introduce some of those to my kids, and they found that they enjoyed books that they probably would never have picked up on their own. That allegorical book that I mentioned at the beginning, that was one of them. This book was probably not something that they would have picked up to read independently, but that book really became a favorite in our family, and I read through at least parts of it more than once because we enjoyed it so much. Another one that was like that, has been like that for our family, is Little Pilgrim's Progress. That is an adaptation of the book Pilgrim's Progress that was written specifically for younger kids. And we read that book aloud more than one time in our family. That's a book that I don't know that the kids would have picked up on their own because they wouldn't have understood the value of it, but reading it aloud allowed me to introduce that book to them. Also, when you read aloud, even to your older kids, it can increase reading and listening comprehension. So you might have a child who can read at a lower independent reading level, but you can read to them at a higher level, and that helps them to begin to understand more about what they're listening to, which in turn will help them understand more about what they are reading. So being able to read to them these books that are at a higher level than their independent reading level can be really important. And this can be especially important if you have a late reader. I always say, and this could be a whole video on its own, but I always say that you do not need to be concerned about a late reader automatically. Yes, there are times when your child may have underlying problems that you will need to figure out, and they may need more help. But there are also some kids who just read late because kids don't develop at the same rate. My youngest child did not read independently until she was about middle of second grade. In fact, when she started her second grade year, there were a few letters and sounds that she didn't even recognize yet. And I was beginning to be concerned. I have a degree in special education and was a teacher before I had my own kids and homeschooled. And I started to wonder if maybe there was an underlying problem that we needed to address. But I decided to be patient because this particular child had this all along. She would be late to do something that I expected to happen earlier, but once she did it, she was really confident in going forward with that. So I decided to be patient when it came to reading. And sure enough, by the middle of that second grade year, she was reading independently, and not only independently, but she started picking up chapter books. So she was a late reader. But because I read aloud, she already had that exposure to language and that ability to develop her comprehension. Reading aloud to your kids can also help them to develop their own writing skills. When kids hear good writing, it helps them to understand the vocabulary as well as the flow and the pattern of good writing. And this will help them to become better writers for themselves. This is another benefit to reading aloud, even to your older kids, because just because kids can read independently doesn't mean that they are very good writers independently. And reading books aloud to them, books that are well written and use good vocabulary, that can really help them to develop their own skills as a writer. Another benefit of reading aloud, no matter the age, and this is one of those things that can benefit even you as a mom or you as parents reading aloud to your children, is that reading aloud gives the opportunity for some really great discussions. I mentioned at the beginning of the video the book that we were reading at lunchtime, that we were able to just sort of go on to this discussion and had a really good discussion about the topic. There have been many other times that has happened. There are times that after we read a section of a book, we talk about the character's actions and we can discuss, should this have happened? Is there a better way to do that? And this kind of leads into the last benefit I want to mention also, which is that reading aloud can benefit the whole family by encouraging critical thinking. And I think this critical thinking and the discussions go hand in hand. And what I mean is that when you're discussing maybe how a character handled a certain situation, or did you think this is what was going to happen, and what else would you have expected to happen? If this was unexpected, what would have been the expected outcome? What do you think the outcome should have been? Do you think that this character handled the situation correctly? Do you think that the relationship between these two characters was good, or how could they have worked on their relationship? Being able to discuss things like that really encourages critical thinking, and it gives you the opportunities for those great discussions. There have been things that have come up because of books that we read aloud that I wouldn't have thought necessarily to bring up to discuss with my kids, but they were topics that were really valuable for discussing. And so reading aloud has that benefit for the whole family, even for you as a parent. So I would encourage you to read aloud. Read aloud to your little kids, yes, but continue to read aloud to your older kids as long as you can, because there's so many benefits for your kids and for yourself when you read aloud.